Welcome to About Face Theatre presents 5 Questions With, and our guest today, producer Neil Murray. Neil has been director of the Abbey Theatre alongside Graham McLaren since 2015. Before that, he was the executive producer of the National Theatre of Scotland for over 10 years, where he helped take the theatre from a standing start to productions that went on to the West End and Broadway. Neil, before that, was also director for 6 years of the Tron Theatre in Glasgow. Neil, you're very welcome.
Great to see you both. Good to be here.
It's good to have you. Thanks for joining us. So we're just going to dive straight in. Yeah. So the first question for you is just what play or experience first got you into theatre?
Yeah, it's very specific. I remember it very distinctly because I grew up in South Wales in a town without a theatre, so theatre had not really touched me. And I went to college in Manchester in England. And as part of my degree, this is in the early 80s, before you two were born, probably. And, I had to go to London. I worked in London for a year as part of my degree. You had to kind of do a year's work. I worked at the very unglamorous London Borough of Newham Finance Department. But while I was in London, I was really, my real love was music. And I kind of played in bands and was seeing rock and roll all the time and film and visual art a bit. But I thought, when I'm in London, I thought I should go to the theatre. I've never really been to the theatre. I should go to the theatre. So I went down to the ticket booth in Leicester Square, where they used to discount all the tickets. From 5 o'clock, they literally give them away for, half price or less if they hadn't sold. And I went down, I thought, and I saw the play I saw, the title really intrigued me, was The Accidental Death of an Anarchist by Dario Fo. So I went to see that in Wyndham's Theatre in the West End, and it was the original London production of it. So it was the world premiere production by a company called Belt and Braces, who were a kind of political agitprop theatre company who'd somehow ended up in the West End with Dario Fo. And it was an amazing night. It was kind of like a kind of Damascene experience. I think because it was funny and it was political and it was urgent. It was all the things I still love now, actually. If you look at all my work, really, it's pretty much informed by that night. And I left the theatre thinking, I don't know what I want to do, but I wanted to be something to do with that. It wasn't like I want to be an actor. Or I want to be, it was like I just want to be involved in making what those people just did. So that piece has always stayed with me. And I've seen a number of productions since, and I literally normally leave after 20 minutes because it's never my memory. It's like no, no, that's not Belt and Braces. I'm out of here. So that play is a particular. The very, very clear kind of landmark for me.
Yeah. Right. Oh, brilliant.
So, okay, so then Neil, Dario Fo is a big influence on you. But tell us, what's a great play that you love and why? Okay,
I'll give 2. The great classic play I love is The Crucible by Arthur Miller. I just think it's just, I think the storytelling is so extraordinary and so tragic. You're taken on this journey, and I just find it every time I've seen it. In fact, and also that was the first time I came to the Abbey, was John Crowley's production of The Crucible with Owen Rowe playing John Proctor. I think it was Owen Rowe, I'm sure it was. So I really love that play, and it always speaks to me. It's one of those plays where no matter when you see it, it seems to be totally relevant. Again, it has an urgency that it always speaks to a moment and a time. The play I really love as well is a play I worked on, which was a play by a writer called Zinnie Harris, who was a Scottish writer living in Scotland. And it wasn't a debut play, it was a second play, but it was a play called Further Than the Furthest Thing. And it's an extraordinary play. And we produced it at the Tron in a co-production with the National Theatre in London, directed by the Tron's director of the time called Irina Brown. And it's the extraordinary story based on Zinnie's grandfather had been a kind of minister in the church who'd suffered shell shock in the Second World War. And as a way of helping him recover, they sent him to be the minister on Tristan da Cunha, which is a very small island in the South Atlantic. It's the most remote place in the world. It's equidistant from Buenos Aires in one direction and Cape Town in the other.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And it's a remarkable play, and it's written that the people who live there are the descendants of shipwrecks. It's a British, actually, it still has it's a British colony, and they speak in this bizarre, almost Napoleonic English. And it's a remarkable play, a really extraordinary play, and it was an amazing production, graced by one of my favorite ever performances by an actress called Paola Dionizzotti, played the lead character, Mil Lavarello. And we did her at the Tron, we did it at the Edinburgh Fringe at the Traverse, and then it went to the National Theatre in London. And eventually we toured it to South Africa. And it's a play, weirdly, that people have really struggled to get it right. You know, there was a production in Ireland, which I didn't see, but I think people struggled with it a bit. There was a disastrous production of it at Manhattan Theatre Club in New York, but they really got it completely wrong. And strangely, the only other really good production was at Dundee Rep in Scotland. So I don't know if it speaks to the Scottish ear. I'm not sure. But it's a really remarkable play. I commend it to you. It's got this thing.
That sounds great. I think that's a discovery. I'm intrigued now.
It's a brilliant play. And it's one of those plays you almost have to read her out loud, though, because of the dialect. It's written in the dialect, and you need to kind of go, you know, it's a remarkable piece of writing.
Ooh, we look forward to it. So then in your, theater experience, in your theater life, have you ever run into a situation where something turned out different than you initially expected it to?
Oh, lots of things. Lots of things. I'll give two examples. One really good and one really bad.
Oh, no.
The good one was that when we started up the National Theatre of Scotland in 2005, one of the first projects we started working on was we asked Greg Burke, the Scottish writer who'd written a play called Gagarin Way, and a few other plays, but Gagarin Way had been his big hit, to write a play to look at the experience of what was happening to Scottish soldiers coming back from Iraq into Scotland. Because Greg lived in a town called Dunfermline, which was a big stronghold of the Black Watch Regiment, Scottish Army Regiment. So we asked Greg to kind of follow the story of what was happening to the soldiers coming home from Iraq. And out of that, we announced a production called Black Watch, which was the story of the Black Watch Regiment, a famous Scottish regiment, of a tour of duty in Iraq in what was called the Triangle of Death up in the north of Iraq. And we announced it, and it was going to be on at the Edinburgh Fringe during the Edinburgh Festival. And it was a really big first statement from the company. It was only our second or third production. And by the time we went into rehearsal, Greg had written nothing. He had a load of interviews of soldiers, but we didn't have any narrative through it. And somehow, Greg, the director John Tiffany, the choreographer Stephen Hoggart, the designer, the whole team, they managed to pull all this material together into this remarkable production that kind of went on to kind of conquer the world, really, and made a lot of people's careers, came out of that production. So we literally went into rehearsal thinking it's going to be, we're dead, we're toast. And I know you often think that, but we literally didn't have, all we had were piles of paper. And I suppose, and the bad experience was a production where we had this wonderful idea that we'd been working in Scotland with a brilliant writer-director called Anthony Nielsen. Anthony's most famous play is probably like The Wonderful World of Dissocier, a few other pieces, a brilliant writer who makes his own work usually. And we decided to pair him with a very well-known Scottish writer called Alistair Beaton, a very experienced writer of kind of very political farces. And we thought this was going to be the world conqueror. We thought this will end up going to Broadway. We've got the Anthony, who's one of the kind of angry young men of the 80s and 90s, with Alistair, who's the old campaigner. They'll get on like a house on fire, and it'll be a triumph. And it was very clear from the very first meeting that was not going to be the case. And it was the show was called Caledonia, and we did it at the Edinburgh International Festival in the King's Theatre. It actually was quite a big hit with audiences, but Alistair and Anthony, shall we say, clashed a little during the process. And it was just every day was trying to keep the production afloat through a very hot summer of trying just try to stop one or other of them from walking. And that was my job, was to literally, it would start, the first call of the morning at 8 in the morning would be from one of their agents. And the last call at 11 o'clock at night would be the other one's agent. And it was literally a game of just trying to keep them on board. So, you know, I think it just shows that things that you think are going to be kind of, you can't make a hit. You think you can make a hit and you can't. And often things that you think are not going to work, somehow some magic happens somewhere, some alchemy happens, and you end up with a triumph, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so talking about the magic and the alchemy of theatre, you've had a wonderful career so far, Neil, in the theatre. But what is it about the theatre that keeps you coming back to it? What moves you? What excites you about theatre?
I think it's genuinely it's expectation. I go to the theatre. You know, I see you there. You're there as much as I am. You two, but you know, I go to the theatre 3 or 4 times a week still, and I've been doing that for a long time, and I still go in thinking it's going to be brilliant. I go in with an expectation that it's going to be great, and often it isn't, and often even the work you make yourself isn't, and you finally realize that eventually, even though you can start for like it wasn't that good, was it? But I go and see other people's work with an expectation. I still have that. I suppose that I think it goes back to that first story about the accidental death of an anarchist. I still go in with that kind of like, wow, what's this going to be like? And hopefully it'll be brilliant. So it's expectation, and I think that's about going to see work. But I also get it from an audience when I'm working in the theatre. I would say to people, my favorite sound is the sound of the audience over the tannoy backstage. I just love that sound of an auditorium filling, and a bit like, you know, they used to say that the hangman could judge a man's weight by shaking his hand before. I can tell you the size of the audience by the murmur of the auditorium. And I've done it for bets with people at the Abbey, and they go, no, you can't. And I'll go, I bet you, you know, within a ratio of 15 either way, I can tell you how many people are in, and it's pretty much always right. Something about the volume of the sound, you go, oh, that's a 320 audience, you know. That sound is fantastic. I just love something about, and it's the audience's anticipation excites me. So it's expectation and excitement.
I love it.
I love that, the hubbub before a show.
Exactly. That's the very word for it, the hubbub.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit there about, you know, remarkable audience guessing number skills, right? And a little bit about like people managing skills, right? And dealing. But are there any skills in theater that you've learned through theater and through your time in theater that you feel are really applicable or useful in the rest of your life?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I learned the skills from theatre and brought them to life, or learned them from life and brought them to theatre. I mean, I'm not sure, but in the end, I suppose being a producer, the job as a producer is to try and keep people happy. You're really trying to keep everyone happy, you know. Whenever you stand around a big meet and greet, people say, you say, I'm the producer. I say, what does the producer do? And I say, I balance the art and the money. That's the job. Balance the art and the money, get them both right. And I think that's right about producing generally. And I think you do take that into life. You know, I think a sense of negotiation, particularly. I think I'm pretty good at that. I think I stay calm. I'm not a producer who kind of bangs the table and shouts. I'm kind of like, let's try and get everybody on board. So, you know, I have 2 teenage children, so that takes a lot of producing sometimes. So I think a sense of being able to be fair. I think to act with fairness and integrity. If you can do that, I think if you can do that in life and do it in the theatre, you'll probably be okay. So, you know, I think that producing element of trying to keep everybody on board and trying to keep everybody, if not happy, at least prepared to carry on.
Not running out of the room and calling their agents.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that's why, I mean, that experience, I often use that experience when people say, what's what's the best lesson you've learned? Well, what's the thing you're most proud of? The thing I'm most proud of was that production didn't collapse.
Yeah.
It should have collapsed, really.
Yeah.
And I think with many of the theaters, it would not have happened. It would have simply been abandoned. They would have said, oh my God, it's not gonna happen.
Forget this.
Just somehow we kept it afloat, and that became the triumph of it.
Well, this has been terrific, Neil. So just, I guess, as a bonus question, what are you working on at the moment?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, this is such a, it's such a hard time for everybody working in theatre, isn't it? In terms of trying to plan what we're doing. So, I suppose I'm really proud of what the Abbey did in 2020 in terms of the amount of work we managed to keep going and reinvent. We were really hoping in 2021 that a lot of the projects we kind of put on hold, like, Faith Healer, The Boy, could happen in 21. So, we haven't given up hope entirely on everything yet from that season, but we're starting to think again. We're working on a very big new digital project, which I can't tell you what it is because we haven't announced it, and my comms team tell me. But that'll be announced in the next week, and that'll happen quite quickly. Again, it's going to goes back to what we've been talking about, a kind of urgent response to an issue that needs to be addressed now. So we're working on that. And then really, I think the aim, as the Abbey, as a national theatre, our role is we have to make sure we're providing work for artists and for audiences. So we're really determined to, keep the wheels turning again this year now through 21, and hope that perhaps as we get to the end of 21, certainly maybe by the end of, certainly into Q3, that we can really get audiences back into the theatre in significant numbers. That's really our hope.
Yeah. I think it'll be a really happy day for all of us when we get back to sitting in the Abbey and getting ready to watch a show. I think that's going to be it's going to be hard to keep the tears back, I think, that day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, it's going to be an emotional time, I think.
Yeah. Well, Neil, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Pleasure.
It's such a joy to hear a little bit more about your story and about your relationship to theater, your love for theater. So just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to everyone who's watching too. It's great to have you, and we look forward to seeing you next time on AboutFACE Theatre Presents 5 Questions With.
If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and share. Thanks for watching.